Good morning, my name is Shannon. I'm the Acting Vice-Chancellor of the University of Canberra and I'm speaking with Michelle Grattan this morning.
Good morning, Francis.
Michelle, there's been one major issue in the media this week, and that is the treatment of boys in Northern Territory detention. We saw some shocking images on Four Corners on Monday. Malcolm Turnbull swiftly announced a Royal Commission, and yesterday he has appointed former Northern Territory Chief Justice Brian Martin to lead the commission. Has the government responded effectively to this issue so far?
I think Malcolm Turnbull has responded well. Now, there are criticisms of the consultation process, that there wasn't adequate consultation or any consultation much with Indigenous groups, and there have been some other criticisms of the terms of reference. But overall, I think that the swift response was appropriate, and that the fact that the Commission is confined to just looking at the Northern Territory is quite reasonable. That's where the immediate problem is, and to have something that reports fairly soon and in a limited geographical scope, I think is quite the right way to go.
So coming to the way the Royal Commission might work then, are the terms of reference sufficiently broad?
I think they are broad enough. It takes in not only the detention system, which of course has been the focus of attention, but also the related child protection system. So that dimension means that it covers a fair sweep of issues.
There was talk of broadening it across the country. Is that important or not, or should it be more focused and quick?
I think if it was broadened across the country, it's a much bigger, longer exercise. And while there obviously are arguments for that, the more compelling argument is to get something done in the Territory and keep the momentum going there, and therefore the narrower focus makes sense.
It has been pointed out that some of the more controversial incidents which were detailed on Four Corners, for example, the use of so-called spit hoods and extended periods of solitary confinement, which were pretty confronting images, were actually reported last year. Have both the Northern Territory and federal governments been neglectful in not acting sooner on this information if they had it?
I think that the Northern Territory government in particular has performed very badly. Now, it would say that it responded to reports last year which in fact detailed almost all this material, although they didn't have the film, and that's why it's been so shocking, I think, to many people, and that's why the whole issue is suddenly crystallised. But they knew all the facts. Now, they say they've done things, but clearly they haven't done enough, and the Chief Minister, Adam Giles, quite quickly had a whole series of responses, which was an admission really that they hadn't performed properly. He incidentally is facing an election in August, which must be a pretty unnerving situation for him, because he was already in a lot of trouble. He's now in a whole heap more trouble. As for the federal government, I think that it should have known more about this or absorbed the material. Now, we don't know whether the reports which were presented last year were read by the federal bureaucrats, whether they provided any advice. The relevant minister, Nigel Scullion, has suggested that he didn't know. Well, it was all over the media. It was in these official reports. It just seems amazing that the federal government can now say, oh, we are shocked, and yet missed all this material which was right out there in the public domain. So it is an indictment of both governments, mostly the Northern Territory, but also the federal government to an extent.
I think, as you say, it was the images that really got people focused on the issue.
But bureaucrats at least should be focused on the words and say to the minister, look, bad things are happening here. you need to be across this.
So rightly this week the focus has been dealing with this particular issue, but should there be more focus on prevention long term and keeping young people out of detention in the first place?
Absolutely, and I think that the federal government should be looking at this quite urgently. Incarceration rates are a disgrace, the level of Indigenous people being incarcerated, and something more desperately needs to be done. Now, one thing that the federal government could do is put a justice target into the closing the gap set of targets that are reported on each year. Labor suggested this before the election. The federal government has resisted this. I don't see that there's any reason for it to resist it. Now, you might say, well, that's not really making a major step, but what I think it would do, if it was backed by adequately resourced programs, would concentrate the minds of the federal government but also the state governments on this problem, because those closing the gap targets are COAG targets, they're collective government targets, and that would at least be one move in a useful direction.
Yes, targets can often make a big difference. As we speak, Malcolm Turnbull is this morning about to make a decision on the nomination of Kevin Rudd for the UN Secretary-General position. This has been quite divisive. What do you think will be the outcome? It's
been very divisive. Yesterday there was a cabinet meeting. You had Julie Bishop, the Foreign Minister, on one side saying Australia should nominate Kevin Rudd, that this is something that the international community would expect because he can only pursue his campaign for the Secretary-General position if he is nominated by his own country. So it's a pretty big thing to deny him nomination, but ministers including the Treasurer, Scott Morrison, and the Immigration Minister Peter Dutton were very against this course, as has been a big section of the Liberal Party. So at the end, the Cabinet decided to leave it to Malcolm Turnbull to make the captain's call. Well, that's a bit of a poisoned chalice if there was ever one, because if he called for Kevin Rudd, said, well, you can be, we will nominate you, then the Liberal Party would be upset. And if he said, no, you can't be nominated, then of course Australia looks a bit odd internationally. Now, we don't know the outcome for certain, of course, but the signs have been that it won't be a happy outcome for Kevin Rudd, but we'll see in a while.
I guess we'll wait and see. It would be interesting. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thanks, Francis.